Okay, that was Boris Gardner with Elizabethan Record. I do remember that from probably about the 70s, I would think, but don't quote me on that. Okay, well, I've got Vic King with me and his oppo Tony O'Nien, sorry. And they're here to talk to us this afternoon about Vaguely Sunny. Now, if you haven't heard of Vaguely Sunny, I don't know where you've been. They're and welcome, boys, I should say.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation, John.
You're very welcome. It's brilliant to get you in. I've been wanting to talk to you for ages. And Vaguely Sunny have brought so much good music to the Isle of Wight. Mainland artists, certainly in latter years, and some classic bands and some classic folk artists. So, Vic, how did it all start for you?
Well, I suppose it's in two parts, John. The original three Vaguely Sunny people was myself, Pete Turner, and the late Mike Plumley, who sadly died about a year ago. We all met in the early 70s. Pete Turner and I met because we were sent by our respective employers at the time on a day release business studies course up at the college.
Okay.
And Pete met Mike around that time. He'd met him on going to a Hawkwind gig, met Mike on the ferry. So all this is sort of early 70s, 71, 72. And what was helpful for Pete and myself, even though we used to go to the college just one day a week, we somehow managed to get ourselves elected as the social secretary of the Students' Union. At that time, the Students' Union had quite a reasonable annual budget to book rock bands, not hugely known ones, but certainly bands that were on the national tours. So Pete did it for a while, and then I carried on the following year, and so there was a little bit of a budget available. I put bands on in the hall up there. It used to get absolutely packed out. I mean, just wouldn't get away with it now from health and safety point of view. But then we were only sort of 19, 20 age, but it did give us a sort of grounding in dealing with agents and contracts and the whole sort of business of how you put a gig on, which obviously came in helpful later on. But at that time, I'll go back to how Vaguely Sunny started. But we mainly used to going to gigs on Portsmouth Guildhall usually, because very little going on the island at that time in respect of national bands come here. So we would troop off to Portsmouth Guildhall or to a festival somewhere. There was always a little inkling of an idea, particularly from Pete at that time, to do a book about rock music on the island. A chap called Pete Frame, who wrote for a really good periodic magazine called Zigzag. I don't know if you've ever come across that. Yeah. Brilliant magazine, fantastic writer, and he did the family trees, where he would cram as much information onto a page that he could, written in a really humorous style, and he continues to be a massive influence on what we did. I actually met up with him earlier this year up in Scotland. So that those family trees particularly gave Pete a little idea that we ought to maybe write something about rock music on the island. But through that period, 70s, 80s, even into 90s, we just got used up. We were just sort of doing other things with families, and particularly football. Pete and I were heavily involved in football. I was the secretary out at West White Football Club in the Hampshire League at that time, and football just puts you in a weekly commitment from one week to the other. You don't have no real time to do anything else. But I had to stop that towards the end of 93 because my father was ill and I couldn't commit to being there in the following season. But so at that time, when I quit the football, all this time suddenly became available, and we thought, we might be able to start this book idea.
Brilliant.
So shall I go on and say a little about that? All that really came together. Mike organised a sort of mystery tour one day in early 93. It ended up at the cottage on the Berkshire Downs where the band Traffic used to live, a very sort of inspirational setting. And somehow that sort of day just put a whole lot of energy into start off the project. It took us 2.5 years to research this book, because it's a mad idea. We were trying to write a 50-year history of rock music on the Isle of Wight from 55 to 95. So far too much to take on, particularly when we were all working at the time. And I suppose the downside of that really was far too much midnight oil got burnt in the process of trying to get the thing together, because it was a huge project, because it included the festivals and all the local stuff. But of course it was all pre-internet, pre-email.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We just have a quick sip here.
Yeah, no, probably carry on.
So it's really time consuming. I used to send handwritten notes to Mike. I would go and interview someone and then send him a handwritten scribe of all this stuff. Yeah. But fortunately, he had a background in print and graphic design. Started by working with Blake's here in the 70s on the island. So with that expertise, he put the whole thing together on a Apple Mac and scanned in a load of photos, and
the book was born.
After 2.5 years, the thing finally came out.
Yeah, brilliant. And it was quite a limited run, was it?
Yeah, we only did a limited edition of 1,000. It came out, we wanted it to come out at the 25th anniversary of the 1970 festival.
Right.
So we just managed to squeeze it out by then. There's a lot of things wrong with it if you look at it now, but it's still a much valued book.
Yeah,
partly because we only did 1,000.
Yeah.
And because it was popular, I suppose particularly if someone had left the island, gone to New Zealand or something, it's a great book for sort of expat islanders.
Absolutely, yeah.
Sort of obviously done as a social history. So within a year, they sold out, and they go for silly prices now on the
internet.
Have
you still got a copy?
Sorry?
Have you still got a copy?
Yeah, I got 3, I think, if I looked around. Yeah, 2 of them are a bit tatty, but I've got keeping one mint one tucked away.
Could be good for the pension fund.
Yeah.
Right,
so that was the book side of things.
We need to go a little break now, a little commercial break, but after that we'll come back and we'll get on to how Vaguely Sunny started up and ruled the rock world.
Excellent, cheers.
And you're listening to Vectis Radio, FM 104.6 and online. And this afternoon we're talking to Vic King and his silent partner, Tony, about Vaguely Sunny. So, Vic, how did the book lead to the formation of Vaguely Sunny? And actually, where'd the name come from? It's a great name, but...
All right, first question. Well, what occurred in about the spring of 96, there were serious attempts to bring the Isle of Wight Festival back, which ultimately failed, unfortunately. But alongside of that, the Isle of Wight Council published this planning policy document, which they do from time to time. It's called the Isle of Wight Development Plan, and it obviously outlines what they see the future for the island, into which areas for housing, which areas for industry, and so on. And tucked away in the small print of this thing at the back was a little note that there should be a permanent festival site.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that to us was quite enlightening, because that was a kind of little start of a sea change of people being actually in favour of the festival rather than against it, because when there were attempts to bring it back in the 90s, people used to write in letters of objection. There's a lot of fear around about drugs and crime and stuff.
Sure.
Mainly people protecting their own property prices, I think, in my opinion. But people would not quite got the understanding that these days it's just ordinary people like us that go to festivals. So we thought, what could we do to counteract that, because we thought there'd be a lot of letters of objection piling in about this idea. So we thought, well, we'll get people to send in an actual letter of support about it. And how could we do that? Well, we'll put a gig on to try and flag up the issue.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, going back to the little bit of experience that Pete and I had got from doing the college gigs. So we just decided to put on this gig at Newport Football Club with some 3 island bands. Didn't really see it as any more than that, just a one-off thing, but to get these letters of support sent in. But it went very well. It was well attended, and we thought we'll do some more. So for a couple of years, we just used to book island rock bands. Very often there were bands of kids who are still at school, Carisbrook High students and stuff. So slowly but surely we got really bogged down with all the kind of non-music hassle of it, particularly underage drinking on the way to the gig, underage drinking after the gig. A lot of sort of baggage came on board. So towards the beginning of '98, we were sort of early 40s at that time. We really couldn't feel particularly comfortable in trying to do that for much longer. So we suddenly changed direction and decided to book Fairport Convention on their 1998 winter tour. And I remember, I think fee was 4,000 plus VAT, I think, which
That's a brave step, isn't it?
At that time was probably about all the money we had, because most of the money is still from the book sales. But at that time, as I'm sure you'll remember, there's no nationally known bands coming over here at all at that period.
No, that's right.
So we did a bit of a straw poll among friends and we had to charge £15 a ticket for that, which is a lot at that time. Don't charge as much as that now.
No.
But a lot of friends said, yeah, we'll support it, and it did sell out. And so that's where we got into this more folky idea of people on tour, national and international tours, which is pretty much the sort of policy today, really.
Yeah. So what followed after Fairport?
Eliza Carthy and all kinds of things from that genre. But your question about the name, when we began, the book was done under the name Isle of Wight Rock Archives. And so when we started doing these early gigs, that name used to be on the poster, Isle of Wight Rock Archives presents, but it's too dry and dusty. People used to think we were geologists or something. I didn't really understand it.
Yeah.
So we were looking for a sort of snappier name. But luckily, I worked with this lovely lady. I was working for South Wight Council with the offices at Salisbury Gardens at Ventnor on the cliff top, with a lady called Lynn Clark. She was the recycling officer, and she must have been she was on the phone to somebody one day. Who must have phoned from the mainland and asked her what the weather was, and she sort of peered out the window and said to the spec, "Well, it's vaguely sunny." And I thought, I'll note that. That's just the little breakthrough we're looking for.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because it's an Isle of Wight weather forecast. I mean, it's vaguely sunny today.
Yeah.
Usually is every day. And it's also a bit of a mental state of mind as well.
That's true,
if you're a vaguely sunny personality, that's all right.
Yeah, that's me down to a T, actually.
There's a few of us about like that.
There are, yeah. Oh, brilliant name. And one thing led to another, I guess, because you've done, well, it must be hundreds.
We don't. Well, yeah. I knew you might ask that. So we have done 245 gigs in 22 years.
That's over 10 a year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's good. Yeah.
God.
I mean, we branched out a bit more recent years. I've done the odd play, helping out sort of local theatre companies. We're quite interested in historic talks. We like the sort of Victorian history of the island. Sometimes someone will give a talk about that. But yeah, essentially a sort of folky, acoustic, rootsy gigs. Make up the most of them.
Yeah, and long may it continue. You're also involved with Harp on Wire. We'll go to a little bit of a break now, but after that, it'd be really fascinating to learn, how you sort of spread your wings. Vectis Radio Wednesday afternoon show. That was the Lars with There She Goes. And I'm here with Vic and Tony talking about the legendary Vaguely Sunny. Vic, you've put on so many gigs over the years, we can't possibly talk about them all, but you must have some favourites in there.
Well, as you say, John, we've done 240 plus now, but if you're pinning me down, there'd be three. First one was 2000, Sharon Shannon, the Irish accordion player.
Yeah.
Don't know if you went to that one. It was at Medina.
Yeah, great player.
Came with a full band. Luckily, we managed to get that one because they were going to Glastonbury Festival the next day. But I'm a huge fan of Irish music. Hugely influenced by going to Galway Arts Festival not every year, but I haven't missed very many, so I knew Sharon through that side of things. But yeah, that she got a standing. That sold out. She got a standing ovation. So that was a real highlight. Second one would be Patti Smith at Farringford, just through the real queue for us to pull that off and actually get her to come here and play a 200 capacity venue in a lovely setting at Farringford. But we just researched her interest in the Victorian history of the island, particularly Julia Margaret Cameron and photography.
Right.
That was just a little carrot.
Bit of a cemetery.
And luckily, she got booked for another. This was in 2009. She got booked for another festival in London around the same time, because we could never have afforded the airfare to get her over here from New York. So that was a. We really big memory for us. And then the third one, funnily enough, 2011 is when we put on a little opera piece at East Dean. I'd never had any experience of opera at all, but we got to know this little company called Opera in Space, who do opera on a very small scale. Right up close to the audience. They hand things out to the audience and get them involved. Then they would take a place and the audience would follow them round from room to room. So we did that at East Dean at Bonchurch, which is one of my favourite places, because I always liked Swinburne, the poet, and everything connected with him. And that went really well, because they had 4 pianos in the place. They lit it really well. It was very atmospheric, completely change of direction for what we normally would do. And we did 2 nights, and I just couldn't, having went the first night, I couldn't wait to get back there for the second one.
Fantastic.
So they would be the 3 highlights out of the lot, John, for me.
Can't believe you got Patti Smith. I've forgotten about that one, actually. I didn't go, but as you gather. But
no, it's a mixture of poetry. Obviously, it was a solo. It wasn't a full-on rock show
no.
by any means. And so it was a mixture of poetry and music. But she did Because of the Night at the end. Again, another standing ovation, and with her and the setting, really memorable. Yeah. Don't think we'd be able to pull that off again, but we'd try.
Well, I don't know your mates now. You never know.
Well, she did. Yeah, she'd like to come back, I think, on the photography side, particularly because she did a photography exhibition at Dimbler in conjunction with that. So maybe it is. 1 or 2 other people are trying to look at that, so we'll see.
And you're pretty heavily involved with Harp and White these days, aren't you?
Yeah, we got a lovely lady called Anna Sacchini, who owns Michelangelo Restaurant in Ryde. She plays harp, which is also a very good sitar player, but she went to a harp festival in a place called in Dinan in Brittany in France in 2013, and a seaside town, a bit like Ryde, and she thought the idea of having a harp festival could transfer to Ryde, so she called a meeting of a few of us. And then, amazingly, now we've done 5 of them. With a small team, there's only 5 of us in the team, including Tony and myself. It's done on a small budget. So sometimes I look back and think, how did we manage to pull that off? Because loads of really good, different international harpists have been to it. The one that finished a couple of weeks ago was probably the best one we've had in terms of the standard of the performances. So I got a bit of a soft spot for the harp. It's probably my favourite instrument. Can't play it, but I just like the sound of it. It came from the Poosies. Where the original band with Kate Rusby and Karen Tweed, and Karen Tweed on accordion, plus the 2 harp players, and when they all merged in together, I thought it was like a little orchestra. So that's largely where my interest in harp started from.
And they're still going strong, aren't they, the Poosies? I think that's still...
at the Memorial Hall a few weeks ago. The guy called Pete Holden now is starting to put a lot of really good stuff on. And he's got some exciting plans for next year for Memorial Hall. Well, and indeed Catherine Finch and Sekou Keita coming up in a few weeks' time. That'll be world-class harp and kora. So Pete's starting to do some stuff. So I think we're going to be slightly careful over here now. We might have to hold back a bit because we don't want to have too many gigs. There's only a limited audience over here. So you're chasing the same people all the time.
Sure.
So slightly careful about going to the well too often, really.
Yeah, it must be getting more and more expensive to put concerts on these days anyway.
Likes of the bigger bands, you know, a band, say, with 5 people in, certainly the likes of your Fairports and Oyster bands, and slightly out of our range now with once you look at accommodation and extra costs and but so we're probably down the other end, sort of looking at the solo people and the duos perhaps, but yeah, we haven't finished just yet. We'll keep going.
Well, if you're taking requests, I think I said to you earlier when we were having a chat that I'd love to see Michael Chapman over here. So.
Okay, that is noted.
Yeah, he's probably fairly cheap these days, isn't
he? Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah.
Yeah, great player. So, any future sort of gigs that you can tell us about yet, or?
Well, 2 things. Saturday week. Lovely comic poet Les Barker coming back here.
All right, yeah.
That'll be hilarious.
He's at the Key,
That's at the Key.
Yeah.
And then, as I mentioned, the Catherine Finch, Welsh harp. She's former harpist of the Prince of Wales, and then the kora player from Senegal, Sekou Keita. That I've seen them in London before. That is a world-class combination of people. So we're putting that on. That's in conjunction with Harp on White and, say, Pete Holden's people at This Is Nowhere. And that's Freshwater Memorial Hall on the 2nd of December. It's a Sunday.
Where can folk get tickets?
They can just ring me up, 730-930.
Okay.
Ring me up for that one, ring up the Key for Les.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And 1 or 2 things lined up. Bubbling Under, Conscious is the 10th anniversary event, the Fringe, next year. We've always done something in that, so we might have to come up with something a little bit different for that. But, yeah, we'll be around doing something.
Good. Long way at last. Well, I think, as I said earlier, Vectis is a bit of a legend on the Isle of Wight, and thanks for all the stuff that you've put on over the years. I know I haven't seen them all. I didn't go to them all, but I went to quite a lot of them and continue to do so. So that's fantastic.
No, we've enjoyed it, and we'll keep going.
Well done. Well, cheers, Vic. Thanks very much.
And thanks to the silent man here, Mr. O'Neill. I couldn't do it without him. He's really got me out of a hole last week in the Heart Festival. I went sick and missed a gig for the first time ever. But no, he's a good combination, so we'll keep going.
Yeah, well, long may it continue. And again, thanks so much for coming in. It's been a fascinating afternoon, and I've loved every second of it. So we've got Joe coming on in a second, and then we're going to be talking about TV and film, and I'm going to talk about fireworks because I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet about fireworks. So we'll talk to you again after the news.
Thanks, John.